The snow was coming down in sheets at 3 in the morning when my emergency phone started ringing, and I knew this was going to be one of those nights where half the county would lose power before sunrise. I grabbed my thermal gear and headed out to my Ford F-350 with the massive plow attachment already mounted on the front, ready to clear the main routes before the ambulances and fire trucks would inevitably need access. My name is Yuri Brennan, and for the past 8 years, I've been the primary emergency snow removal contractor for Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. When the county dispatch calls, I move, no questions asked. Lives depend on it. I fired up the truck and the plow, and the familiar rumble of the diesel engine combined with the hydraulic system created that deep, throaty sound that I'd grown to associate with saving lives. The subdivision where I lived, Meadowbrook Estates, was on my route anyway. I always started there because it connected to County Road 47, which led directly to Clearfield Hospital. If someone had a heart attack or a woman went into labor during a blizzard, those roads needed to be clear. The plow blade scraped against the asphalt as I made my first pass down Maple Drive, orange sparks occasionally flying when I hit a particularly rough patch. The streetlights cast an eerie glow through the heavy snowfall, and most of the houses were completely dark except for a few porch lights. I was about halfway through clearing the main street when I noticed lights flicking on in one of the larger houses. Number 4287. That was Brenda Patterson's place. Brenda was the president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, and she'd been a thorn in my side since I moved here 4 years ago. She'd cited me for parking my work truck in my driveway instead of the garage because it was unsightly. Never mind that my garage was full of emergency equipment that the county required me to maintain. She'd fine me $200 for having a small oil stain on my driveway. She'd even tried to get me to remove my ham radio antenna, which I needed for emergency communications, claiming it violated the aesthetic guidelines of the neighborhood. I kept plowing, making sure to angle the blade properly so the snow berms wouldn't block anyone's driveway. The wind was picking up and I could feel the truck fighting against it. My radio crackled to life. "Brennan, this is County Dispatch. We've got reports of down power lines on Route 879 near the high school. Can you clear a path for the utility crews?" I grabbed the handset. "Copy that, Dispatch. I'm finishing up the Meadowbrook connection to 47, then I'll head that way. Eat a 20 minutes. Roger that. Be advised state police are reporting multiple accidents on Interstate 80. May need you there after the power line situation. Standing by." I was making my final pass when I saw someone emerge from Brenda's house, wrapped in a bright pink bathrobe and slippers, marching directly toward my truck. This wasn't going to be good. I kept the plow moving because I had actual emergencies to get to, but she planted herself right in front of my truck, waving her arms like she was guiding in an airplane. I stopped and rolled down my window. The wind immediately blasted snow into my face. "Madam, I'm on county business. I need to finish this route. Do you have any idea what time it is?" Brenda shrieked over the howling wind. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was already getting ruined by the snow, and her face was twisted in that particular expression of outrage that I'd seen more times than I could count. "It's 3:20 in the morning and there's a blizzard. I'm clearing emergency routes. I don't care if it's an emergency or not. You're violating HOA regulations." Section 47. Subsection C clearly states that no construction equipment, lawn maintenance equipment, or any other noise-producing machinery can be operated between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. You're disturbing the entire neighborhood. I took a deep breath, watching the snow accumulate on her head and shoulders. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm contracted by the county to maintain emergency access. People's lives depend on these roads being clear. I don't have time for this conversation right now." "Then you'll have time for this." She pulled out her cell phone, which was somehow in a waterproof case covered in rhinestones. "I'm calling the police. This is harassment, and I'm certain there are noise ordinances being violated. Do what you need to do. I have actual emergencies to respond to." I rolled up my window and continued plowing. In my rearview mirror, I could see her on her phone, gesticulating wildly as she spoke to whoever was on the other end. I shook my head and focused on the job. 5 more passes and Maple Drive would connect cleanly to County Road 47. Then I could get to the downed power lines. My emergency radio crackled again. "Brennan, update on Route 879. We've got a confirmed structure fire at 2847 Oak Valley Road. Fire department is requesting immediate access. The snow is blocking their trucks." Brennan responding, "I'm redirecting now." "Eat a 15 minutes. I finished the last pass on Maple Drive and swung the truck around, heading for the subdivision exit. As I approached the main gate, I saw blue and red lights flashing. 2 Clearfield Borough police cars were pulling in, and one of them moved to block my exit. This was unbelievable. I had a structure fire to get to, people potentially trapped, and the HOA president had actually gotten the police to respond to a noise complaint during a declared snow emergency. Officer Mike Henderson stepped out of the first car. I knew Mike. We'd worked together on several emergency situations, including a particularly nasty pileup on I-82 winters ago, where we'd helped pull 3 people from their cars before they froze to death. I rolled down my window as he approached. "Mike, I've got a structure fire on Oak Valley Road. Fire department needs access now." Mike looked uncomfortable. "Yuri, I know. We got a call from your HOA president saying you were operating construction equipment illegally and disturbing the peace. I tried to explain the situation, but she insisted we come out and cite you." "Are you serious right now? Look, I'll make this quick. She threatened to call the mayor, the borough council, and apparently she knows someone at the state level. My sergeant told me to come out and at least document the complaint." He lowered his voice. "Just let me write down your information, and we'll get you out of here. I'll mark it as unfounded, but I need to file something." Brenda had followed me to the gate and was now standing next to the police cars. Her arms crossed triumphantly, despite the fact that she was rapidly becoming a snowman in a pink bathrobe. "Officer, I want him cited for noise violations, disturbing the peace, and illegal operation of commercial equipment in a residential zone," she announced. Mike turned to her. "Madam, Mr. Brennan is the county's emergency snow removal contractor. He's legally authorized to operate anywhere in the county during declared emergencies. I don't care what he's contracted for. He lives in this subdivision, which means he's bound by our HOA regulations. Those regulations supersede any county contracts." I couldn't help myself. "No, they actually don't. Emergency services regulations are state-level mandates. They override local HOA rules. Don't you talk to me like I'm stupid. I have a law degree from Penn State." Mike held up his hand. "Everyone just calm down. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to be honest with you. There's a structure fire that needs attention right now. Mr. Brennan needs to go. I'll file a report about your complaint, but I can tell you right now that no citations will be issued because he's operating under emergency authorization from the county. Then I want to speak to your supervisor." "Right now." My radio erupted. "Brennan, where are you? Fire department is reporting they can't get their trucks past the snowdrifts on Oak Valley Road. We may have people trapped inside the structure." I grabbed the radio. "Brennan en route. Police were blocking my exit. I'm moving now." Mike heard the urgency in the dispatcher's voice and immediately waved me through. "Go, go. I'll handle this." I gunned the engine and the big Ford surged forward, the plow blade cutting through the snow that had already accumulated at the gate. In my side mirror, I could see Brenda arguing with Mike and his partner, but I didn't have time to worry about it. Oak Valley Road was about 6 miles from Meadowbrook Estates, and every second counted. The snow was coming down so hard that my wipers could barely keep up. I had the plow angled to push snow to the right side of the road, carving out a path wide enough for the fire trucks to follow. The radio chatter was intense. The fire department had managed to get one truck partway there, but was stuck about a half-mile from the house. The dispatcher was coordinating with state police to establish a perimeter. Someone mentioned that there were definitely people inside the structure. I pushed the truck harder, feeling the weight of the plow and the churning of the tires against the accumulating snow. The orange strobes on my cab were flashing, and I'd activated the additional warning lights that the county had installed on my truck for exactly these situations. When I reached the stuck fire truck, I could see the problem immediately. A massive drift had formed across the road, probably 4 feet high and packed solid by the wind. The fire truck, despite its size and weight, had tried to push through and gotten hung up on its front axle. Fire Chief Robert Malloy jumped out and ran to my window. "Brennan, thank God. We've got a family of 4 inside. Father called 911 saying there was an electrical fire in the walls. That was 12 minutes ago. We lost contact 3 minutes ago. I'll have this clear in 2 minutes. Get your crews ready to roll." I backed up about 50 feet, then dropped the plow to its lowest setting and engaged the full weight transfer system. The truck lurched forward, and I felt all 3,000 pounds of the blade bite into the drift. The diesel engine roared as I pushed through, and snow exploded up and over the windshield. For a moment, I couldn't see anything except white, but I kept the wheel steady and the throttle down. Then I was through. The road opened up ahead of me, and I continued plowing as fast as I could safely move, creating a clear path all the way to 2847 Oak Valley Road. The house was a 2-story colonial, and I could see smoke billowing from the upper windows. The fire trucks came roaring up behind me, their sirens cutting through the night. I pulled off to the side to give them room, but kept my engine running in case they needed me to clear any other access points. The firefighters deployed with practiced efficiency. Hoses were unrolled, axes and haligans appeared, and within 90 seconds they'd forced entry through the front door. More smoke poured out, mixing with the falling snow to create an apocalyptic scene. I watched anxiously from my truck, listening to the radio chatter. They'd found the family on the 2nd floor, trapped by smoke in a back bedroom. The father had managed to seal the door with wet towels, which had probably saved their lives. One by one, the firefighters brought them out. A man and woman in their 30s, a boy who looked about 8, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 5. They were all coughing and disoriented, but alive. The ambulance crew immediately got them on oxygen and started checking their vitals. Chief Malloy came over to my truck, his face covered in soot. "You saved them, Yuri. Another 5 minutes and that whole 2nd floor would have been involved. They wouldn't have made it. Just doing my job, Chief. Your job is saving lives. Don't let anyone tell you different." We both knew he was talking about Brenda Patterson. The fire was brought under control, and the family was transported to Clearfield Hospital for observation. I stayed on scene until the chief gave the all-clear, then got back on the radio with county dispatch. Brennan to dispatch. Oak Valley structure fire access complete. Fire department has the situation under control. What's next, Brennan? We need you on Interstate 80 westbound at mile marker 134. Multiple vehicle accidents, several injuries. State police need access for ambulances. En route. The next 6 hours were a blur of plowing, clearing, and helping emergency responders access people who needed help. I cleared a path for an ambulance to reach an elderly man who'd fallen on his icy porch and broken his hip. I helped state police set up a detour around a jackknife tractor trailer. I plowed the parking lot at Clearfield Hospital so the emergency room could remain accessible. By the time the sun came up, weak and pale through the still falling snow, I'd covered over 100 miles and cleared access to 14 different emergency situations. My hands were cramping from gripping the wheel, my eyes were burning from staring at white snow for hours, and my back was aching from the constant vibration of the truck. But everyone who needed help had gotten it. That was what mattered. I finally pulled back into Meadowbrook Estates around 9:30 in the morning. The subdivision looked pristine, the streets I'd cleared at 3 a.m. still passable despite the continued snowfall. Other residents were starting to emerge, digging out their cars and clearing their walks. Several neighbors waved as I passed, and a few gave me thumbs up. These were people who understood that what I did wasn't just a job, it was a calling. But as I approached my house at 4312 Maple Drive, I saw a bright pink piece of paper attached to my garage door. I parked the truck, too tired to even care at this point, and walked over to read it. It was an official HOA violation notice, signed by Brenda Patterson. Violation of HOA Regulations Section 47C, operation of prohibited machinery during restricted hours. Fine, $500. Second violation of Section 23B, parking commercial vehicle in visible location, driveway instead of closed garage. Fine, $500. Total amount due, $1,000. Payment must be received within 14 days or additional penalties will apply, including potential lien on property. I stood there in the falling snow, reading this piece of paper, and felt something snap inside me. Not anger exactly, more like a cold, calculated fury. I just spent 6 hours saving lives, helping people, doing the job that the county and state had entrusted me with, and this was my reward. I pulled out my phone and called the county's emergency management office. The director, Patricia Walker, answered on the second ring. "Yuri, I was just about to call you. Outstanding work last night. We had 0 fatalities, minimal injuries, and the governor's office is actually commending our response time. That family you saved on Oak Valley Road, the father wants to meet you and thank you personally." "Patricia, I appreciate that, but I need to talk to you about something. My HOA president called the police on me last night while I was responding to that structure fire. She tried to have me cited for noise violations." There was a long pause. "She did what?" I explained the entire situation, from Brenda's initial confrontation to the police showing up to the violation notice that was now fluttering in my hand. Patricia's voice went cold. "Forward me everything. Photos of the violation notice, names, dates, times. I'm going to have the county attorney's office contact her directly. What she did wasn't just harassment, Yuri. She interfered with emergency operations. That's a crime in Pennsylvania. I don't want to escalate this into some huge legal battle. I just want to do my job without dealing with HOA nonsense. This isn't about escalation. This is about making it clear that emergency services in this county will not be hindered by people who think their neighborhood aesthetic matters more than human lives. Send me everything." I took photos of the violation notice, wrote up a detailed timeline of the previous night's events, and emailed it all to Patricia. Then I went inside, showered, and collapsed into bed. The snow was still falling, but the forecast said it would taper off by evening. I set my alarm for 3 hours and passed out. My phone woke me at 1 in the afternoon. It was an unknown number with a Harrisburg area code. "Mr. Brennan, this is Karen Stoltzfus from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. I'm calling regarding an incident that occurred last night in Clearfield County." I sat up, trying to clear the fog from my brain. "Yes, we've been made aware that a local HOA president attempted to prevent you from performing your contracted emergency duties during a declared snow emergency. We take these matters very seriously. I'm calling to let you know that the State Attorney General's office will be opening an investigation into potential interference with emergency services. I appreciate that, but honestly, I just want to make sure this doesn't happen again. I can't do my job effectively if I'm worried about being fined or arrested every time I start my truck. I understand, and that's exactly why we're taking action. Pennsylvania law is very clear on this matter. Under Title 35, Section 7313 of the Pennsylvania Consolidated Statutes, it's a misdemeanor to willfully interfere with emergency operations. If the interference results in harm or potential harm to individuals, it can be elevated to a felony. The family you saved last night, if you'd been delayed even a few more minutes, they might have died. Miss Patterson's actions directly contributed to that delay. What happens now? The Attorney General's office will be sending investigators to interview everyone involved. They'll also be reviewing your HOA's regulations to determine if they are in compliance with state emergency management requirements. Spoiler alert, they're not. No HOA can legally enforce rules that conflict with state-mandated emergency operations. After the call ended, I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. This was getting bigger than I'd anticipated. I just wanted to clear some snow and help people. Now there were state investigators involved. My phone rang again. This time it was Mike Henderson, the police officer from last night. "Yuri, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your HOA president has been calling the station all morning, demanding that we arrest you for various violations." The chief finally got on the phone with her and explained that not only will we not be arresting you, but she's potentially facing charges herself for interference with emergency services. How'd she take that? About as well as you'd expect. She started threatening lawsuits claiming discrimination, saying she'd have the chief's badge. He hung up on her, but I wanted you to know that she's not backing down. If anything, she's doubling down. Great. There's more. She's called an emergency HOA meeting for tonight at 7 p.m. at the community center. The agenda is listed as addressing ongoing violations by resident at 4312 Maple Drive and determining appropriate enforcement actions. Can she even do that? According to your HOA bylaws, which I looked up because I knew you'd ask, the president can call emergency meetings with 24 hours notice for urgent matters. She's claiming this is urgent. I'll be there. Yuri, you might want to bring a lawyer. I'll bring something better. I spent the afternoon making phone calls. First, I called Patricia Walker back and told her about the emergency HOA meeting. She immediately said she'd be there with a representative from the county attorney's office. Then, I called Karen Stoltzfus at PEMA, who said she'd send someone as well. Finally, I called Chief Malloy from the fire department, who said he wouldn't miss it for the world. At 6:45 that evening, I walked into the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center. It was a small building, really just a renovated garage with some tables and chairs, but it was where the HOA held its monthly meetings. About 30 residents were already there, which was unusual. Normal meetings might get 8 or 10 people. Brenda Patterson was standing at the front of the room, arranging papers on a podium. She was wearing a navy blue pantsuit and had her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like she was about to prosecute someone at The Hague. When she saw me walk in, her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Brennan, I'm surprised you have the audacity to show your face here after your behavior last night. Wouldn't miss it." I took a seat in the back row. Over the next 15 minutes, more people filed in. Patricia Walker arrived with a sharp-looking woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Ellen Kowalski, Deputy County Attorney. Karen Stoltzfus from PEMA showed up with a younger man carrying a laptop and briefcase. Chief Malloy came in wearing his dress uniform. And to my surprise, Mike Henderson showed up in civilian clothes. "I'm off duty," he explained, "but I wanted to see how this plays out." Brenda noticed the influx of official-looking people and seemed momentarily flustered, but she recovered quickly and called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. We're here tonight to address a serious and ongoing problem in our community. Mr. Yuri Brennan, who lives at 4312 Maple Drive, has repeatedly and flagrantly violated our HOA regulations. Last night, he operated heavy machinery at 3 o'clock in the morning, disturbing the peace and violating our noise ordinances. When I confronted him about this illegal behavior, he was rude, dismissive, and continued his actions despite my clear instructions to stop. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. I noticed several of my neighbors looking at Brenda like she'd grown a second head. She continued, "Furthermore, Mr. Brennan continues to park his commercial vehicle in his driveway, creating an eyesore and reducing property values for all of us. He has refused to comply with previous violation notices and has shown a complete disregard for the rules that the rest of us follow. Tonight, I'm proposing that we fine him the maximum amount allowed under our bylaws, $5,000, and if he doesn't pay within 7 days, we'll file a lien against his property." Patricia Walker stood up. "Mrs. Patterson, may I address the board?" Brenda looked annoyed. "This is a closed HOA meeting for residents only. Actually, under Pennsylvania law, any meeting where legal action is being proposed against a resident must be open to that resident's legal representation. I'm Patricia Walker, Director of Emergency Management for Clearfield County. This is Ellen Kowalski, Deputy County Attorney. We're here on Mr. Brennan's behalf. I don't care who you are. This is an HOA matter and you have no jurisdiction here." Ellen Kowalski stood up, and when she spoke, her voice had the kind of authority that comes from years of courtroom experience. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to inform you that you are potentially in violation of Pennsylvania Criminal Code Title 35, Section 7313, Interference with Emergency Operations. Last night, Mr. Brennan was performing contracted emergency snow removal services for Clearfield County during a declared snow emergency. Your attempt to stop him and your decision to call police to his location directly interfered with those operations and resulted in a measurable delay in his response to a structure fire where 4 people were trapped. The State Attorney General's office is currently investigating whether to file criminal charges against you." The room went completely silent. Brenda's face had gone from confident to pale in about 3 seconds. "That's ridiculous. I was simply enforcing our HOA regulations." Karen Stoltzfus stood up next. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm Karen Stoltzfus from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. I've reviewed your HOA's regulations, and I need to inform you that several of them are in direct violation of state emergency management statutes. Your noise ordinance, for example, cannot legally be enforced against state or county authorized emergency personnel performing their duties. Your restrictions on commercial vehicles cannot be applied to emergency services vehicles or equipment. Essentially, you've been operating under bylaws that are partially illegal. One of the other residents, an older man named George who lived 3 houses down from me, raised his hand. "Brenda, what the hell is going on?" "Yuri's truck is the reason my wife was able to get to the hospital last winter when she had her heart attack. The ambulance couldn't have gotten to our house if he hadn't plowed the streets." Another neighbor, a woman named Susan, stood up. "My son has asthma. During the blizzard 2 years ago, we ran out of his medication, and he had a severe attack. Yuri personally drove to the pharmacy, got his prescription, and brought it to our house at 2 in the morning because the roads were so bad that the delivery service couldn't get through. You're trying to fine him for saving lives." Brenda was starting to lose control of the room. "This isn't about his emergency work. This is about following the rules that everyone else has to follow, rules that we all agreed to when we bought our homes here." Chief Malloy stood up, his uniform gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Madam, I'm Fire Chief Robert Malloy. I've worked with Yuri Brennan on dozens of emergency calls over the past 8 years. Last night, the family he saved, the Hendersons, they have 2 young children. Those kids are alive right now because Yuri was able to get to their street and clear access for my trucks. Your decision to delay him, even by 10 minutes, could have killed them. Do you understand that?" Brenda's jaw tightened. "I understand that rules exist for a reason, and that no one should be above them, regardless of their job." Ellen Kowalski pulled out a folder from her briefcase. "Mrs. Patterson, I have here a cease and desist order from the Clearfield County Attorney's Office. You are hereby ordered to rescind all fines and violations issued to Mr. Brennan that relate to his emergency services work. You are also prohibited from interfering with his operations in any way. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt and subject to arrest." She walked forward and handed the document to Brenda, who took it with shaking hands. "Additionally," Ellen continued, "the county is putting all board members of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA on notice that your bylaws must be brought into compliance with state emergency management regulations within 60 days, or the county will pursue legal action to dissolve the HOA." One of the other board members, a timid-looking man named Harold, raised his hand. "Can they do that?" "Yes," Ellen said simply. "Pennsylvania law allows counties to petition for dissolution of HOAs that create public safety hazards. Your current bylaws, as written, do exactly that." The meeting devolved into chaos after that. Board members were arguing with each other, residents were demanding explanations, and Brenda was standing at the podium looking like her entire world had just collapsed. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Patricia Walker approached me. "Yuri, you're clear. All violations are rescinded and the county is backing you 100%. If she or anyone else in the HOA tries to interfere with your work again, call me immediately and we'll have law enforcement involved." "Thank you, Patricia." Karen Stoltzfus handed me her business card. "Mr. Brennan, the state appreciates the work you do. If you ever have issues like this again, anywhere in Pennsylvania, you call me directly. We don't tolerate interference with emergency services." As people started filing out of the community center, several neighbors stopped to shake my hand or thank me for what I did. George clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't let these bureaucrats get you down, son. You do good work." Susan gave me a hug. "My kids call you the Snow Angel." "Thank you for everything you do." I was about to leave when Brenda appeared in front of me, Her eyes were red, and she looked like she'd been crying, but her jaw was still set in that stubborn line. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You may have the county and the state on your side, but I'm the president of this HOA, and I won't be bullied into submission. Mrs. Patterson, I don't want to be your enemy. I just want to do my job and live in peace. Why can't you let this go? Because rules matter. Order matters. If we let one person break the rules, even for supposedly good reasons, then what's to stop everyone from doing whatever they want? This neighborhood will descend into chaos." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that she genuinely believed what she was saying. In her mind, she wasn't being petty or vindictive. She was protecting her vision of how the world should work, where everyone followed the rules and stayed in their proper place. "Mrs. Patterson, last night I helped save 4 lives. 2 of them were children. That's not breaking rules for the sake of it. That's doing what's necessary when people need help. I hope someday you'll understand the difference." I walked past her and out into the cold night air. The snow had stopped, and the sky was starting to clear. Stars were visible between the clouds, bright and sharp in the freezing air. Over the next few weeks, things settled into an uneasy peace. The HOA board held several emergency meetings to revise their bylaws, and from what I heard through the neighborhood grapevine, Brenda had opposed every single change. She'd been outvoted on each one. The restrictions on noise during emergencies were removed. The commercial vehicle restrictions were amended to specifically exempt emergency services equipment. Several other regulations were softened or eliminated entirely. Brenda became increasingly isolated on the board. 2 members resigned, citing philosophical differences with her leadership style. A 3rd member, Harold, told me privately that he'd only voted for her proposals out of fear that she'd make his life miserable if he didn't. "She's got something on everyone," he explained. "She knows who's behind on their dues, who's had marital problems, who's had the police called for domestic disturbances. She uses that information to keep people in line." That got my attention. "That's not just unethical, Harold. Depending on how she got that information, it might be illegal." "I know, but nobody wants to stand up to her. She'll destroy you." I thought about that conversation for several days. Brenda Patterson wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. She was someone who'd built a small empire of fear and control, and she was willing to do whatever it took to maintain it. I decided to do some digging. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the borough for any police reports involving Brenda Patterson or the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. I also reached out to several other neighbors, asking if they'd had similar experiences with her. What I discovered was disturbing. Over the past 6 years, Brenda had filed over 200 violation notices against residents. Some were legitimate parking violations or lawn maintenance issues. But many were petty and vindictive. She'd fined a widow $300 for having dandelions in her yard during the week of her husband's funeral. She'd cited a family for having unapproved Christmas decorations because their inflatable Santa was 6 inches taller than the regulations allowed. She tried to have a resident's dog declared a dangerous animal after it barked at her during her morning walk. But the most troubling thing I found was a pattern of targeting specific residents who'd opposed her on the board. One former board member, a woman named Teresa, had voted against one of Brenda's proposals to increase HOA dues. Within a week, Teresa received 5 violation notices for various minor infractions. Within a month, she was facing over $2,000 in fines. She eventually sold her house and moved away. I compiled all of this information into a detailed report and sent it to Ellen Kowalski at the county attorney's office. I also sent a copy to the state attorney general's office, Attention to the investigator handling Brenda's case. The response was swift. 2 weeks later, the state attorney general's office announced that they were filing criminal charges against Brenda Patterson for interference with emergency services, harassment, and abuse of authority. They were also opening a civil investigation into the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA, for potential violations of Pennsylvania's consumer protection laws. The day after the announcement, I was in my garage organizing equipment when I heard a car pull into my driveway. I looked out to see an unmarked sedan with government plates. 2 people got out, a man and a woman, both wearing professional attire and carrying badges. "Mr. Brennan." "I'm Detective Sarah Chen, Pennsylvania State Police. This is Detective Marcus Wright. We're investigating the HOA situation." "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course. Come in." We sat in my living room and I answered their questions for over an hour. They wanted to know every detail of my interactions with Brenda, every violation notice I'd received, every conversation we'd had. They were particularly interested in the night of the snowstorm and her decision to call the police. "Mr. Brennan, you understand that what she did wasn't just annoying or petty, right?" Detective Chen said. "She actively interfered with emergency operations during a declared state of emergency. If that family had died because of the delay she caused, she could have been charged with manslaughter." "I understand, but I don't think she saw it that way. I think in her mind she was just enforcing rules." "That's the problem," Detective Wright said. "She's so focused on her little kingdom that she can't see the bigger picture. We've interviewed about 20 other residents, and the pattern is clear. She uses the HOA as a weapon against anyone who disagrees with her or doesn't show her proper respect. That's abuse of authority, and it's illegal." They left after extracting a promise that I'd testify if the case went to trial. I agreed, though part of me hoped it wouldn't come to that. But Brenda Patterson had other ideas. 2 days after the detectives interviewed me, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Philadelphia. Brenda was suing me for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $500,000 in damages. I immediately called Ellen Kowalski, who laughed when I read her the complaint. "Yuri, this is what we call a slap suit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to intimidate you into backing down from the criminal case. The good news is that Pennsylvania has strong anti-slap laws. We'll get this dismissed, and she'll probably end up owing you attorney's fees. What do I need to do?" "Forward me the complaint. I'll have our office file a motion to dismiss. In the meantime, don't engage with her or her attorneys at all. Let us handle everything." The lawsuit became the talk of the neighborhood. Most residents were appalled that Brenda would sue me after everything that had happened. A few of her supporters claimed I was waging a vendetta against her and that she was the real victim. But the tide had clearly turned against her. The annual HOA election was scheduled for early April. Normally, Brenda ran unopposed because no one wanted the headache of being on the board. This year, 5 people announced they were running for president specifically to oppose her. One of them was George, the older man whose wife I'd helped get to the hospital. "Someone needs to stand up to her," George told me. "And it might as well be me. I'm retired, I've got nothing to lose, and I'm too old to be scared of her petty threats." The criminal case against Brenda moved forward. In March, she appeared before a district judge for a preliminary hearing. The prosecution presented evidence of her interference with emergency operations, including recordings of her 911 call where she demanded that police arrest me, testimony from Officer Mike Henderson about the delay she'd caused, and expert testimony from the fire chief, about how those 10 minutes could have been the difference between life and death for the Henderson family. The judge found sufficient probable cause to bind the charges over for trial. Brenda's attorney tried to argue that she'd simply been enforcing HOA regulations and had no criminal intent, but the judge wasn't buying it. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, the judge said. And furthermore, the evidence suggests that Mrs. Patterson was well aware that Mr. Brennan was performing emergency services. She chose to interfere anyway. That shows intent. Brenda was released on her own recognizance, but the judge ordered her to have no contact with me or any other witnesses in the case. That meant she couldn't participate in HOA matters that involved me, which effectively neutered her power. The HOA election in April was a landslide. George won the presidency with over 70% of the vote. Brenda received just 8 votes out of nearly 100 cast. All of her allies on the board were voted out as well, replaced by reasonable people who wanted to focus on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement. At the first board meeting under George's leadership, one of the first motions passed was a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA. They also voted to reimburse me for all the fines I'd paid over the years, which totaled over $3,000. "Yuri, we're sorry," George said at the meeting. "We let Brenda turn this neighborhood into her personal fiefdom, and we didn't stand up for what was right. You deserve better, and we're going to make sure the HOA actually serves the community from now on." The applause from the residents in attendance was genuine and heartfelt. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like I actually belonged in Meadowbrook Estates. Brenda's lawsuit against me was dismissed in May, just as Ellen Kowalski had predicted. The judge found that it was a clear slap suit designed to intimidate a witness in a criminal case. Brenda was ordered to pay my attorney's fees, which came to about $15,000. Her attorney withdrew from representing her shortly after, citing irreconcilable differences. The criminal trial was scheduled for June. The prosecution offered Brenda a plea deal: plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge of interference with emergency services, pay a fine, perform community service, and resign from any position of authority in the HOA. She refused. "I've done nothing wrong," she told a local news reporter who'd been covering the case. "I was simply enforcing the rules that everyone agreed to follow. If that's a crime now, then we're living in a society where chaos and anarchy are rewarded." The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented a devastating case. They called the Henderson family, who testified about the fire and how close they'd come to dying. Mrs. Henderson broke down crying on the stand when she described waiting in that smoke-filled bedroom, not knowing if help would arrive in time. They called me, and I described in detail the events of that night. The snowstorm, the emergency calls, Brenda's confrontation, the police blocking my exit, and the delay in reaching the fire. They called Chief Malloy, who explained in technical terms how those 10 minutes of delay had brought the family within minutes of death. The fire had progressed to the point where the second-floor hallway was fully involved, he testified. If Mr. Brennan had been delayed any longer, we wouldn't have been able to reach that back bedroom. The family would have died from smoke inhalation. The defense tried to argue that Brenda had simply been doing her job as HOA president and couldn't have known that a real emergency was happening. But the prosecution played the recording of her 911 call, where she'd clearly heard me tell her about the structure fire and had insisted that police stop me anyway. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Brenda guilty of interference with emergency operations, a misdemeanor that carried up to 1 year in jail and a fine of up to $10,000. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge was not lenient. "Mrs. Patterson, You had multiple opportunities to recognize that your actions were wrong and to correct course. Instead, you doubled down at every turn. You prioritized your authority in a homeowners association over human lives. That shows a fundamental lack of judgment and a dangerous disregard for public safety. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, suspended pending successful completion of 2 years of probation. She was fined $5,000 and ordered to perform 500 hours of community service. And she was permanently barred from holding any position of authority in any HOA in Pennsylvania. Brenda stood there in the courtroom, her face completely expressionless as the judge handed down the sentence. She didn't cry or protest. She simply nodded, turned, and walked out. I saw her one more time after that. It was early on a Saturday morning in September, about 3 months after the trial. I was doing some work on my truck in the driveway when I noticed her walking past my house. She was wearing jeans and a volunteer vest, picking up litter along the sidewalk as part of her community service requirement. She saw me and paused. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she did something I never expected. She nodded, just a slight dip of her head, and kept walking. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was something. A recognition that we both existed in this neighborhood and that maybe, just maybe, we could coexist without destroying each other. I nodded back and returned to my work. Life in Meadowbrook Estates improved dramatically under George's leadership. The HOA focused on actual community improvement projects like fixing the playground equipment, organizing neighborhood social events, and maintaining the common areas. Violation notices were rare and only issued for genuinely problematic situations. My work with the county continued without interference. That winter was particularly brutal, with 3 major snowstorms that required round-the-clock emergency operations. Each time, the HOA board sent me messages of support and appreciation. George even arranged for the neighborhood to give me a plaque that read, "In appreciation for your service to our community and county. You make us safer." I mounted it on my garage wall, right next to my county emergency services certificate. The Henderson family, the one I'd helped save that night, became good friends of mine. Their kids, Emma and Jake, would wave enthusiastically whenever they saw my truck. Mr. Henderson told me that his daughter Emma had announced she wanted to be an emergency responder when she grew up because heroes like Mr. Yuri save people. That made every cold night, every hour fighting through blizzards, every confrontation with petty bureaucrats worth it. Brenda completed her probation without any violations and moved away from Meadowbrook Estates about a year after the trial. I heard through the grapevine that she'd relocated to Florida, where apparently HOA culture is even more intense than Pennsylvania. I hoped she'd learned something from her experience, but I wasn't holding my breath. The important thing was that our neighborhood had learned something. We'd learned that rules and regulations have to serve people, not the other way around. We'd learned that authority comes with responsibility, and that abusing that authority has consequences. And we'd learned that sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to people who hide behind rules to justify their desire for control. 2 years after the incident, the county offered me a promotion to become the regional coordinator for emergency snow removal, overseeing operations for 3 counties. It came with a significant pay increase and even better equipment. But it also meant I'd be spending less time actually plowing and more time managing other contractors and coordinating with emergency services. I thought about it for a long time. Patricia Walker told me I'd be perfect for the job and that it would be a natural progression in my career. The county commissioners personally called to encourage me to accept, but in the end, I turned it down. I appreciated the offer, but what I loved was being out there in the storms, clearing roads, creating paths for ambulances and fire trucks to save lives. I didn't want to become an administrator. I wanted to keep doing the hands-on work that made a direct difference. Patricia understood completely. Yuri, the county is lucky to have you, whatever capacity you want to serve in. Just promise me you'll keep doing what you do best. That's an easy promise to keep. I still live at 4312 Maple Drive in Meadowbrook Estates. My truck is still parked in my driveway, and when the snow starts falling and my emergency phone rings in the middle of the night, I still jump into action without hesitation. The difference is that now, my neighbors understand what I do and why I do it. They appreciate it rather than resent it. Last winter, during a particularly bad storm, I was plowing the subdivision at 4 in the morning when I noticed lights coming on in several houses. But instead of angry residents coming out to complain about the noise, they were coming out to wave, to give me thumbs up, to let me know they appreciated what I was doing. George even brought me a thermos of hot coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, his breath creating clouds in the frigid air. "Stay safe out there." That's what community is supposed to be. Not rules for the sake of rules, not authority for the sake of control, but people looking out for each other and supporting those who serve. The legal aftermath of the Brenda Patterson case had ripple effects throughout Pennsylvania. The state legislature, prompted by the publicity around the trial, passed new laws clarifying that HOA regulations could not interfere with emergency services operations. Several other counties adopted policies similar to Clearfield's, formally documenting that emergency services personnel were exempt from HOA restrictions when performing their duties. I was even invited to testify before a state legislative committee about the challenges of providing emergency services in HOA-governed communities. It was surreal, sitting in Harrisburg in front of a panel of state representatives, explaining how something as simple as plowing snow could become a legal nightmare when HOAs prioritized aesthetics over safety. One representative, a woman from Delaware County who'd been a paramedic before entering politics, thanked me for my testimony and said something I'll never forget. "The people who write HOA regulations never think they'll be the ones who need emergency help at 3 in the morning. They never think they'll be the ones trapped in a burning house while someone argues about noise ordinances. Thank you for reminding us what actually matters. The laws that passed weren't revolutionary, but they were necessary." They established clear guidelines that HOAs had to include exemptions for emergency services in their bylaws. They created penalties for HOA board members who interfered with emergency operations. And they made it easier for emergency services personnel to seek legal remedies if they were targeted by HOAs for doing their jobs. Ellen Kowalski told me that the laws were informally being called Brennan's rules in some legal circles. I wasn't sure how I felt about having laws named after me, but if they prevented other emergency responders from going through what I'd experienced, then I was proud to be associated with them. Years have passed now since that night when Brenda Patterson stood in front of my truck in a pink bathrobe, demanding that I stop plowing snow while people's lives hung in the balance. The anger I felt at the time has long since faded, replaced by a kind of understanding. She wasn't evil, just misguided. She'd built her identity around being the person who enforced rules and maintained order, and when that identity was challenged, she couldn't adapt. I hope she's found peace wherever she is now. I hope she's learned that there are things more important than regulations and bylaws, that human life and safety trump aesthetic guidelines and noise ordinances every single time. As for me, I'm still doing what I do best. Every winter, when the first snowflakes start to fall and the forecast calls for accumulation, I make sure my truck is ready, my plow blade is sharp, and my emergency phone is charged. Because somewhere out there, someone is going to need a road cleared so an ambulance can get through. Someone is going to need help, and I'm going to be there to provide it. That's not just my job. That's my calling. And no HOA, no matter how petty or power-hungry, is ever going to stop me from answering that call. The community center, where that fateful HOA meeting took place, has a different purpose now. George and the new board transformed it into an actual community gathering space. They host potlucks, movie nights, kids' activities, and during emergencies, it serves as a warming center for residents who lose power. Last winter, during a particularly nasty ice storm, we lost power throughout the subdivision for almost 18 hours. The community center, which has a backup generator thanks to a county emergency preparedness grant, became the hub where everyone gathered. I helped transport elderly residents there in my truck, making sure everyone had a warm place to wait out the outage. Mrs. Chen, who lived alone and was in her 80s, held my hand as I helped her into the center. "You're a good boy," she said in her heavily accented English. "Not like that terrible woman who was always sending me papers about my garden. You help people. That's what matters." That's what I hold onto during the long, cold nights when I'm plowing roads at 3 in the morning, when my hands are numb and my eyes are burning from staring at endless white snow. The knowledge that what I do matters, that the work is important, that somewhere out there, someone's life might depend on the path I'm clearing. The Henderson family still lives in the neighborhood. Emma is in middle school now and volunteers with the junior firefighter program. Jake wants to be a paramedic. Both of them credit that night, the night they almost didn't make it, with inspiring them to pursue emergency services careers. Mr. Henderson told me recently that they'd considered moving after the fire, but decided to stay because of the community that had emerged from the ashes of Brenda's reign. "This place used to be run by fear," he said. "Now it's run by people who actually care about their neighbors. That's worth staying for." I've been offered jobs in other counties, positions that would pay more and provide better equipment, but I always decline. Clearfield County is my home. These are my neighbors. These are the roads I know by heart, the houses where I can tell you who lives there and what kind of emergencies they might need help with. There's Mrs. Rodriguez at the corner of Elm and 3rd, who has a son with cerebral palsy. If the power goes out, she needs access to the hospital within hours for his medical equipment. There's the Murphy family on Oak Street, with premature twins who came home from the NICU last year. They need clear roads if something goes wrong. There's Mr. Okonkwo, a dialysis patient who needs to get to his treatments 3 times a week without fail. These aren't just addresses to me. They're people, lives, stories. And that's why I do what I do. The county recently recognized my 10 years of service with a commendation from the commissioners. Patricia Walker gave a speech about how I'd responded to over 400 emergency situations in that decade, cleared more than 50,000 miles of snow-covered roads, and had a perfect safety record. "Yuri Brennan represents the best of what public service can be," she said. "He's not in this for glory or recognition. He's in this because when someone needs help, he answers the call. Every time, without fail. Clearfield County is safer because of him." The applause was nice, and the crystal plaque they gave me has a place of honor in my living room. But the real reward comes in quieter moments. It comes when I see the Henderson kids playing in their yard, alive and healthy. It comes when Mrs. Chen waves to me from her garden, which is now filled with whatever flowers she wants, because the new HOA board doesn't care about regulation-approved plant lists. It comes when George stops by with a six-pack to watch a football game, and we talk about normal neighbor stuff instead of legal battles and HOA drama. Sometimes, when I'm plowing in the early morning hours and the world is quiet except for the rumble of my engine and the scrape of the blade on pavement, I think about that night that started all of this. If I could go back and change anything, would I? Would I approach Brenda differently? Would I try harder to make her understand? I don't think so. Some people need to learn lessons the hard way. Some systems need to be challenged before they'll change. If my confrontation with Brenda and the resulting legal battle helped reform HOA regulations across Pennsylvania and made it easier for emergency responders to do their jobs, then it was worth every moment of stress and frustration. The snow falls every winter, predictable and impartial. It doesn't care about HOA regulations or property values or aesthetic guidelines. It just falls, covering roads and blocking access, creating barriers between people who need help and the people who can provide it. And every winter, I'll be there with my truck and my plow clearing those barriers away. Not because I have to, but because it's who I am. It's what I do. It's my purpose. The emergency phone sits on my nightstand every night, ready to ring at any moment, and when it does, I'll answer. I'll gear up, fire up the truck, and head out into whatever storm is raging, because that's what emergency responders do. We answer the call. Every time. No matter what. And no HOA president in a pink bathrobe will ever stop me from doing that again.